Well, how you doing, his crew family? Here we are again for another episode. I have my friend Roy Custombotter, and he wants to tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Christian, ready, equipped, and willing in disabilities ministry. That's something that a lot of people don't understand and don't really want to get involved in. But I hope after today you're going to have a little bit more understanding of what disabilities ministry is and how it can be a rewarding ministry for you. Roy, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
So, you didn't always want to be in disabilities ministry, did you? You didn't wake up one day and say, let's get in disabilities ministry.
No, as a matter of fact, it was the farthest thought from my mind, and I consciously avoided it, actually. Grew up in the mountains of Pennsylvania and went off to college in Tennessee. Majored in psychology and sociology mostly to try to understand the family a little better because my dad was abusive. One of those families would be referred to as dysfunctional. And the word fun is in the middle of that word dysfunctional. So my family put the fun in dysfunctional.
There you go.
So I go off to college mostly because my dad wanted me to go somewhere in Pennsylvania. There are lots of good colleges in this state. Penn State University is just spitting distance from us, so I wanted to avoid that one at all costs. Mm-hmm. Growing up in the country, living in a town of about 35,000 people, no. So I learned about a college in East Tennessee. I'll fast forward. So majored in psychology and sociology, graduated, spent a year back in Pennsylvania just hopscotching around trying to make some money because I was engaged to be married in Indiana. Got married. My wife taught an elementary school. I started out in a middle school in special education, brand new school. I talked about avoiding disabilities at all, but with a degree in psychology and sociology, I quickly learned that really all I prepared for was grad school. I thought I was done.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
A bachelor's degree was enough. No. So anyway, more to the point, I had a stack of rejection letters, both in Pennsylvania and in Indiana. Finally, I found an opportunity in special education, and I was scared to spitless because the school that I went to back in the 60s was much like most schools. Way back in the back 40 of that school was a special ed classroom. Mm-hmm. One. They were so segregated that their bus dropped them off at the back door of the school. I mean, this is a fairly large school for a rural area, fairly new school. So nobody ever saw them. They went to lunch before the rest of the general population back to their classrooms. So we were afraid of them. Right. You know, you segregate them, that's the way they're supposed to be, away from everybody. So fast forward back then to teaching. I went off to, had an opportunity at a school to be a trainer for the football program, Pleasure Ridge Park High School across the river, and really enjoyed that. The classroom, an interesting way that I got some of the football players to come because they had some of the nicer names for that class was the Sunshine class, not just the retards, which is what most people, the biggest reference was.
That was back in that time period, right?
Early 70s.
Early 70s.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure the listeners understand that was a term that was widely used during that time.
Oh, yeah. At a football game, one of the players took a real hard shot to what's called the solar plexus, base of right in the ribs. He'd pass out, start hyperventilating and passing out. They couldn't get an ambulance in because fights had started out, big rivalry between Southern High School and Pleasure Ridge. So people were parking all over the place because the police that were there, security, was breaking up fights. So they found a way to get a police car across a field, came in the other end of the field, down the middle of the field, picked him up. Mom jumped into the car too. So got him to the hospital. I had to do mouth-to-mouth on him to get him to revive him. The doctor said to tell him that I gave him 75 milligrams of Phenergan, which is a real heavy-duty muscle relaxer.
Right.
It relaxed his diaphragm before he stopped breathing. So anyway, fast forward from that too. That Monday morning, he was there with 2 or 3 of the other players. That broke down that implied barrier, because those boys learned that, some of these guys are really fun to talk to. I even had one of the players who was into chess. He never imagined that anybody in a special ed classroom could play chess. So that's where it all started breaking down, which was something that was really good.
So you have that background, you have that experience. So fast forward.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
To where you kind of got into the ministry aspect of it.
About 4 years into that, my daughter graduated from high school, New Albany High School. Started out at the school where I went, where Nancy and my wife and I went, Milligan College. Learned that there was actually a college where she could go, Christian college, where she could get a degree in disability ministry, because she volunteered. I went off from teaching to Silvercrest Children's Development Center, which was a state-operated facility that did a lot of diagnostic work even. She volunteered there. The staff really loved her. So while after her freshman year, she learned about this school and that they had an internship available with Power Ministries, with the founder, was actually, had cerebral palsy and was in a wheelchair himself. So she did that, kept telling me, Dad, this camp program is absolutely awesome, because that's the founder remembered when he was a kid going off to a Christian camp in a wheelchair. He spent a lot of time by himself or with kitchen staff, others.
Right.
So she kept telling me, Dad, you've got to come to one of these camps. Lake James would be the best one, way up in northern, up north of Fort Wayne. So I kept telling her, typical of the way God operates. And you know that if that's a weekend session, by the time I get done with case conferences, it's going to be past 5 o'clock. You said it's just like a 5 to 6 hour drive. We're going to get there at midnight. Tell you what, if I ever have a time when I have no case conferences and I can bust out early, I'm in. Now, that was the last session for the year. The following spring, we get to that same week, and my daughter was bugging me because she was going to go there to volunteer.
Right.
This is summer from college. My administrative assistant comes in on Wednesday and telling me, Roy, you're not going to understand. You're not going to believe it. You don't have any case conferences for the rest of the week. And I'm like, wait a minute, are you talking about that one that's on Thursday? No, listen to what I'm saying. You have no case conferences, because she knew that I had made that commitment. I just looked up and said, okay, Lord, could you make it a little more clear?
Because you're an educated professional.
Master's degree by that time.
Doing a professional's job, trying to treat the disabilities. You know, when you and I first met and you invited us to go out to a Power Ministry camp, I don't want to steal a lot of thunder, but we'll kind of just say, hey, there's a lot of things that went in between that first time you went to Power Ministries camp to then you quitting your job and becoming the executive director of that ministry, right? We don't have to go into all those details. I just want to kind of bridge it there. But you invited our Bible study group to come out. Just come out on Saturday and serve the Saturday night meal and stay for the talent contest. That's what your challenge was to us, trying to get more of us guys involved in the disability ministry.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this: we went to that first time, and you know we wanted to do Salisbury steak, and we did mashed potatoes, and we did green beans. We wanted to just put on a big spread.
Salad, the whole bit.
Yeah, we wanted to put on a big spread, and everybody was asking me, how are you going to know how to cook the temperature of the steaks? Because everybody likes their meats cooked differently. How are you going to make sure you have enough, right? You know, because some extra volunteers showed up, and it was a big old deal. And we just started praying, and we just said, hey, God's going to take care of this, right? And I remember one of the campers, we gave him the food, and one of the campers told one of the guys working, says, you know, that is the best ribeye steak I've ever had. And it was ground beef.
Yeah, Salisbury, yeah.
It was Salisbury
Chopped
steak.
meat,
It was
yep.
chopped meat. And it just melted. It just melted that guy for him to
yeah.
hear that. And then, you said, guys, you got to stay for the talent show. Now, there's not words can explain the talent show. I think you would do a better job than I would. I'll just say this. Right before, the thing that got me right before, I went to the bathroom right before the talent show. And I was in there and I watched a 15-year-old teenager taking care of a severely disabled person. I don't remember if he was a boy or a man, but he was severely disabled. And he was emptying his catheter.
Yeah.
And,
Emptied his leg bag.
that still gets me right today to think about this 15-year-old kid didn't care. He didn't flinch when I walked in the door like he was embarrassed or anything. He took care of that man, got him cleaned up, and wheeled him out to the talent show. And I felt about that big. Because like you said earlier, people look down at disabilities. And I don't say I looked down at it, but I never truly understood it till then.
Yeah.
And what, God still can touch even the disabled.
Right. Well, one of the other guys who was there, Cliff, I didn't even know that he had a disabled son. Now it's ADHD, so it wasn't a cognitive disability, but still, he was in a special education program. And later on that night, he stuck around even longer. Busyness in the dorm, getting campers ready for bed because we had several, like you described. This young man was in a wheelchair that
Could not care
Cliff
for
was
himself
watching.
at all.
Right. Yeah. Catheter.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a leg bag too. And Cliff was at the door looking terrified, but I was too busy. I kept glancing to the door, and he just stood right there. Didn't even want to move in. I mean, there was a lot of commotion because we had a lot of men there. Most of them were men. And I finally walked over and I said, "Cliff, are you okay?" He said, "I'm absolutely not okay." He said, "I am so ashamed of myself. I'm watching that young man right over there. What's his name?" I said, "Justice, actually." How old is he?
That's the same kid, 15.
15 years old. Probably the same guy.
It is. It was the same guy.
Wow.
I know it was.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's cleaning him up because he was wearing the Depends, had to clean him up. So the dorm smelled of that because he wasn't the only one. And walking away, I'll fast forward, but that was his introduction to several guys like that. And I had time to walk out with him a little bit, and he said, "I am so glad I came here."
Yeah.
Now, before he left, he did go to some of the ones who were less disabled to talk to them, just so he could talk to them, interact with them, because it was his first experience in that. So there you have it. Wasn't long after that I had decided I was already in there, but made the decision to quit what I was doing at Silvercrest, which was state operated. We were paid well for what we did and had a buffet of benefits.
Right.
I gave up a significant amount of money. I won't go into how much, to no benefits. I had to work to get even medical benefits. So that was probably about 2 or 3 years in that you guys were there.
Right.
And sure, we had financial problems, but
God always provided for you, didn't he?
just point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
So.
And you were 100% all in. I remember.
Yeah.
You did everything, right?
Absolutely.
Setting it up and doing the camps. You did probably 7 or 8 camps a year or more.
We got up to 20.
20 camps a year just for disabled people.
All over a multi-state area.
All over multi-state. You traveled. You did all the work. You put on the whole weekend. You cleaned up after everything. and you still kept things going. And I remember when you asked me and a few other people to be a part of the board. I was so honored to get on that board and help try to move the ministry forward. And I think we made a lot of good strides during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And
You did.
the thing is that for the listeners, what obviously your professional background prepared you to be ready for disabilities work, not so much disabilities ministries, but I believe that did help you in your ministries, right?
Absolutely.
But how did you transition from state ran disabilities to ministry ran disabilities? I mean, you had to have a strong faith in God.
Oh,
Obviously, right? Because there was a lot of prayer and sweat and tears and doubt that you made the right decision. But I know you had the full support of your family. Your daughter got involved into the ministry there as well. But how did you become? What did you do to become equipped to do that? I mean, not everybody just wakes up and says, "I want to do disabilities ministries" to the level that you were talking about.
I guess the clearest way I can put it was that I didn't want to be equipped, but I guess desperation would be a word. Newly married, literally had to take a job in special education because we had just gotten married. So that by that fall, I worked in a gas station that summer, a service station. Actually, it was did a lot of mechanical repairs because I grew up around cars. And thinking back to it, the board of directors had initially backed me, but they began to get kind of cold feet, and I finally had to tell them that I raised the money myself to get there, to get in there.
Right.
So I had my salary covered for that first year. And of course, a lot of that commitment stayed. So to prepare myself, it really was a step of faith. It was that guy at Lake James, at that camp,
Right.
who really, right there.
Yeah. You're there because you want to be, not because you're paid to be,
Yeah.
right? And I think that, and you've always talked about that, several times in different settings as you've tried to get more people involved in the ministry, right? And so, what does it take to be willing to be in that ministry? I mean, that's a tough ministry, right?
It's a tough one, yeah.
Because you don't know if they're getting the message of God, you don't know if they're hearing the message of God, yet you're delivering it. I mean, I've sat and watched how you present the gospel to a room full of disabled people, and you can just see the countenance upon their face, right? That they're getting it, and it's almost like you're talking, but they can't hear what you're saying, but God's speaking internally to them. That's the way it looked. Their face, that they could just hear God speaking to them through what you were doing. And I just willing. How can we get more people involved in disabilities ministry?
That's really the people that I began to talk to, because a couple of years in, I was trying to keep things to somewhere between the low end of that continuum of cognitive deficiency to the milder. And it finally hit me. The volunteers, they're the ones that we really needed. Okay? So I began to gear everything to my presentation to them, because there was a little possibility of hitting a midpoint in my presentation. So I began to talk to them. I was more preaching to them than I was to the campers, because they're the ones then, if I change their hearts, that'll change the interaction that they have.
And the care they get during the weekend, right?
Yeah. And a lot of them were coming, new ones were coming. We always encouraged our volunteers, bring somebody else with you.
Right.
They're the ones that were fun to watch, because by the time that first night in the dorm came, they were looking for any means of escape they could possibly find.
Right.
But they began to realize, if my friend can do this, I can do that. So we changed hearts a lot from that population too.
I remember playing basketball, with 3 disabled guys. It was 3-on-1, and they were trash talking me like it was no business. I mean, I had the most fun doing that, and they beat me, which was fine. I'm very competitive, but just the freedom that they had and the enthusiasm, and then to watch them do their little talent show. I mean, it there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
Oh, every time.
Every talent show. I mean,
me too.
And you watched hundreds of them.
Oh yeah. But there was always somebody new, and some of them that would play a piano, a guitar. It's like, I didn't know they could do that.
Right. Yeah.
One guy that even up in, that's another one that was up on northwestern Illinois. A guy that played a guitar with his feet.
Oh, wow.
And I'm talking talented. But he was identified as cognitively deficient. Not by much.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you retired from the ministry, right? It was time for you to retire from the ministry. Unfortunately, Power Ministries, where's Power Ministries today?
Coming back, I'm 75 now, so it was 5 years ago, coming back from that camp that I started to talk about in north central Illinois. And you're right, we had to get there 2 hours early every time, coming back from that one, because I had to carry lots of gear like this, multimedia stuff, because my education program was multimedia based.
Right.
So I had to set that up, never knowing what kind of equipment the camp would have or anything. So when I hit the ground, I was setting that kind of stuff. We were getting dorms set up, modifications to beds and so forth. A whole battery of things got done just in time for supper, which was right after that was when the volunteers came in. So, and then soon after that, campers, and really rigorous, as you observed. Right. You can't imagine. So coming back from that one in north central Illinois, but my wife and I are both, neither one of us were fit to drive, but we had a long way to go to get home.
Right.
The time has come, and fortunately the transition that I was shooting for came, because I wanted, if I demonstrated anything to the camps, is they could do this without Power Ministries, because they were paying us. Right. They were paying Power Ministries to do this, and I proved to them that they could do it themselves. Right. So after that, now that was the next to the last camp of that year. White Mills was the last one, which of course is close. Right. So coming back, we had already made the determination it's time. So I started making all the contacts, so that I went to, each year there's a National Camp Leaders Conference in January, because that's one of the rare times a year when they don't have much to do.
Camps going on, right?
Yeah. So I went that one last time, and I had already began to demonstrate them. They were all committed to, we're going to do this ourselves. Didn't know when. Well, it came a little sooner than they anticipated, but they realized that they were prepared. God prepared them through us. So that last Camp Leaders Conference, we went, and I took all kinds of curriculum materials, like 18 years of curriculum, equipped them with all of that stuff. I spent the whole winter just getting all of that stuff compiled to where I could present it to them. And of course, they've gotten in touch with us. And some of them were instrumental in watching the other camps. Wow, what's this Power Ministries thing? I think we could probably do that too. So they're all working together now. So it was God's timing.
It was God's timing for that ministry to kind of fade away, and you transitioned all of the hard work over the years to the camps to do it themselves.
And we had tried working with 5 guys over those years who were committed to taking over Power Ministries, but didn't need to. God was trying to tell me all the time, I've got this, and you don't need anybody.
Right.
I was trying to make another me, and they didn't need another me.
Well, one of the other fond memories that I have of Power Ministries is my family got to be a part of one for the whole weekend. My son and daughters were in the worship band. My wife came out and took pictures. And that's one of the fondest memories I have of our Ministries camp, of being able to serve with the family and do that. So, as we kind of close things up here, I want you to tell the listeners, disabilities ministries. Some churches have disabilities ministries because they have disabled people coming to the church. They want to be able to take care of them and make sure they get to enjoy the same things with the family, being at church together. What words of wisdom do you have for churches out there today that have disabled members or children of members that are disabled? What can they do? What are some things they can do to prepare the church to receive and minister to the disabled?
But to get past that, it's a fear factor there for them too. Can we actually staff someone, staff the program? I guess there's an old story I remember years ago, an old country church. There was an elderly gentleman there who had tried to get them to serve people with disability, disabled kids at least.
Right.
And the preacher was already into his sermon when this one young man just came strolling into the church and looked, and there was really no place he could sit or could seat himself or wanted to seat himself. So he just went and sat down at the front of the church. And the preacher was really nervous. Well, the old guy that had been trying to encourage them to work with guys like that, it must have been in his 80s, as I recall, just walked up to the front of the church with that young man, sat down with him, and said, "Carry on, Pastor." Nothing to be afraid of was the message he was.
So basically, be ready, equipped, and willing to just do it. Right? Just get involved. Don't be afraid of it.
There are so many resources out there that through schools and other churches, because during those years that Nancy and I worked with, there were even smaller churches that got into a disability Sunday school class at least.
So what's your favorite verse that helps people understand ministering to the disabled?
Well, that would absolutely be John 9:1. That's that one. I think you referenced that one not long ago, where I think it was a blind man that went into a church. I can't remember chapter and verse, but Christ had encountered this man, and one of the disciples, one or more of the disciples, walked up to him and said, "Now, is this man in this condition because of something that he did wrong, sin in his life, or sin in the family's life?"
Yep. Yeah. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. The disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," Jesus said. "But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world."
That's a key verse.
Yeah, that's the key verse. Being a light in the world, right? It doesn't matter who you're ministering to, whether they're disabled or not, incarcerated or not, homeless or not. You just need to be a light of the world to be able to witness to them.
That's it.
Well, Roy, this has been a fun time talking to you about disability ministry and reminiscing about what we've done and what you've been able to do. And for my listeners out there, if you have a church that have some disabled people coming to church and you don't really think that they're being taken care of, like it in the comments, put some comments down there. I'll get you hooked up with my friend Roy.
Yes.
He'll be more than happy to meet with the church and walk them through what they can do to get a disability ministry set up inside their church. I know you'll do that because you do it. You're doing it today. Anywhere you go, you're willing to just help people out and understand how to take care of disabled people. So, Roy, as we close it up here, I wish you'd pray us out. Would you do that for us?
I'd be glad to.
All right.
Wow, and Lord, thank you for the opportunity. Didn't know what I was getting myself into as you pushed me into to settings like this. You can get me into to opportunities such as this. So thank you for the time that we had together, and I know that you were clearly in the midst of all of this conversation, because magical things happen when we do that. So help us all all those people out there, to put aside the fear that I had in my own life so long ago. to allow themselves to interact and truly minister to people such as those that my wife and I ministered to for so many years. All because of you, Lord Jesus, and what you do in our lives and what you do in their lives. And that's why we'll always pray it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow so you can keep up with what's going on. Thank you.